Good morning, everyone. I am Zolega Soji, as Razana has indicated. It is my pleasure to be here this morning. I was hoping to do my presentation in person, but circumstances were beyond my control. Hence, I'm joining you online. And I will be presenting the first part of the Reg H form. I am aware of time. That's why I'm skipping quite a number of slides in order for us to be able to spend some time in the first part of the Reg H form, because that is the part that I've been asked to present. And I saw the chairperson of our Reg H. Currently, I'm the vice chair of Reg H, as well as representing the faculty, as Razana has indicated, rightly so. So one of the things that I hope colleagues, it's okay then if I present without my video. Okay. So one of the issues that we usually discuss, and I know from the past as well, that we were always discussing, is at what point do we really look at ethics when we are looking at our research, or when we're planning our study, or when we are busy with our studies. We find that we usually look at ethics towards the end of the study. Isn't that the case? So we don't worry about Reg H, or ethics. We don't worry about the processes involved in terms of ethical approval processes. We start developing our proposal. And then as an add-on, that's only at that time that we think about ethics. However, I always advise that we need to think about ethics at the conceptualization of the study. Why am I saying so? When we are conducting a study, it's important for us to do what we refer to as a feasibility study, or an analysis, feasibility analysis, so that you can be able to look at whether your study is going to be conducted within the required time, whether as a researcher you have the know-how, the expertise in terms of conducting your study. You also need to be able to consider whether what you want to do can be done within the time that you have, within that limited time. If you're at master's level, you have, if it's full-time studies, you have your stipulated period in terms of you being able to conduct your study. I know that it used to be, I might be incorrect, I think anything between 2 to 3 years. As well as PhD, you also have your stipulated maximum time on which you can be able to do your study. So you want to be careful in terms of the topic that you are going to select, as well as the participants, your subjects, or the target population that you want to utilize in order for you to be able to conduct your research. So if we're not going to think about ethics at the conceptualization, we're bound to run into challenges as well as frustrations. So what do we do when we want to conduct research and we want to consider ethics as part of conceptualization? There are certain documents that are important for you to consider. And one of those documents, for me, that I found very, very useful when I think about ethics is the ethics guidelines, the Department of Health 2015 ethics guidelines. And if you're looking at the guidelines, they really speak to various aspects of your proposal. So already you have a document that guides you, a document that tells you what are some of the aspects that are very, very critical, aspects that are important for you in terms of thinking about that should shape your thinking around your study. So if we're looking at the ethics guideline, it tells you, it guides you around the scientific design, aims and objectives of the study. It also helps you to think about, if I've identified, or if I wish to conduct my study and I have this particular target population, what are some of if I think about qualitative research, we know that you cannot be able to engage with everybody. You have to select a sample group. So this ethics guideline will help you with issues such as inclusion, exclusion criteria. How am I going to select my study population? And what are the procedures that I need to take into account when I think about sampling? It helps you to be able to look at how am I going to even recruit my population, my participants, as well as the rest of the other aspects that the second speaker is going to focus on. So this is one of the documents that we want you to be able to familiarize yourself with. There are other documents that are very, very critical. For instance, the SOPs are very important because they indicate what is the role of the PRP versus PI. They stipulate a whole lot of other things that are related to the ethics process as well as the approval processes. You also want to be able to look at the Nelson Mandela research policy, because that helps you in order to understand our internal processes. And lastly, you also need to be able to familiarize yourself with the POPI Act, because that act is very, very important. So as I indicated, each proposal should include a description of these ethical considerations. And these ethical considerations are not only linked to data collection, they are linked to even how you're going to conceptualize your study, the design that you're going to select, how you're going to formulate your aims and objectives, and the alignment of your aims and objectives in terms of the research instruments. Dalray will tell you that we usually get questions around, and I can understand the frustration of the students as well as their supervisors. We usually get questions around, if my proposal is going to serve at a faculty postgraduate studies committee and they have conducted a scientific review of my study, why then is ethics bothered or concerned about still looking at our aims and objectives? Why are they commenting on issues of design? Those are, and methodology, those are the frustrations that I also carried before I participated in the ethics committee as one of the reviewers. It's important because all the decisions that you are taking in research has ethical implications that you need to consider. So we want to be certain that you factored that in. For instance, when you are conducting a study and you are using a wrong or selected a wrong design, that has implications in terms of your ability to come up with reliable findings. You will have put people through a process that is not going to yield the desired outcomes. Also, certain research designs, by implication, carry a level of risk when we are using them. When we ask people to tell their stories, when we're asking people to tap into their own experiences, those are the designs that we use in research that sometimes we don't always consider. What are the risks that are involved? What are the ethical implications that I need to consider when I decide on these particular designs? So for us, we want you to be able to reflect adequate consideration of your participants' welfare and rights. Each and every participant, we live in South Africa. We have the constitution of the country. The constitution states the rights and responsibilities, and we need to be able to factor this in demonstrating our respect for persons, demonstrating that we consider the right to self-determination as well as other rights that are stipulated in the Constitution of South Africa. We're dealing with human beings. Even when we deal with animals, you need to take care in terms of ensuring that we are protecting those that are giving us information. So we want all your documents that you are going to give to your participants to provide information in terms of how are you going to be able to take care of the ethics? How are you going to ensure the rights of individuals? How are you going to ensure fairness in what you do? How are you going to attend to issues of justice, social justice? And how are you going to protect your research? Ultimately, it's really about protecting your research participants. So as a researcher, there are certain indications in the guidelines that are very, very critical for you. For instance, when you are working on your documents, the issues of language that you are going to use, the issues of how much information you're going to give to your participants, why would you withhold certain information, issues such as whether you've taken into consideration the profile of the people that you are working with, whether they are going to understand, and how are you even communicating information about the research study so as to allow them to make informed decisions of whether they want to participate in research or not. I have here the old page that we utilize. If you're looking at the new page, you will go onto the intranet, you go onto the staff or student profile, and then where you get to the different links, you look at academic, and under academic, you'll be able to see ethics, research ethics, and then the research ethics under that page, you will be able to access documents pertaining to the research, these documents that I spoke about. One of the aspects that we say you must be able to conduct you must be able to do as a researcher even before, as part of completing the research ethics form, you need to do a risk analysis of your study. So the ethics form, the first part of the ethics form will give you some definitions of concepts. The second part of your ethics application form provides you with a risk analysis. So if you assess the risk of your study, if it's lower risk, you know that it's approved at faculty level. If it's medium risk to high risk, your proposal then must go to ethics, to Reg H. So whether your proposal is lower risk or no risk at all, you are required to complete the Reg H form that you're going to get on in the page that I've shown you before. And when you get to this page, you will also see very, very important documents that you need to be able to download. Depending on the nature of your research, these documents will help you in order to be able to complete as part of the appendices that you are going to attach to your research proposal. So as I indicated, that you need to familiarize yourself with these documents, make sure that you understand them and put them in your desk when you're completing the research ethics form. So when we're looking at the ethics form itself, I need to skip this page. When we look at the Reg H form itself, you will see the very section A of the form you're not going to complete, because that is the form that is going to be completed by Reg H Secretariat once we've registered your study and all the other processes have been taken into account. So this page is important, but it's important for us as the reviewers. The second page that you are going the second part of this, you get to general particulars. Under general particulars, you have to be able to give us the title of the study. Are you aware that we are able to, it's possible for one to be able to look at the title of the study and to be able to see the ethical implications linked to the study itself. So you need to be able to provide a concise description of your title of the study. Point B says that you need to provide the rationale for the study. Now, why are you giving us a rationale for your study? Every study must make as a contribution. It must be geared towards changing the lives of human beings and society. So when we are asking you to be able to provide us with the rationale of the study, we really want to be able to look at what is the value of the study, what is the social value of the study, what is the societal value of the study, as well as what are the ethical values of the study. So you will be able to give us even some references so that we can be able to look at what is the value of the study. Part C is saying to you that this application focuses specifically on the procedures to which human subject will be participating in the study. Remember, you are requesting ethical approval for the data collection because you are going to use human beings. That is why you're going to complete the Reg H form. This form is completed by the student as well as the supervisor. In this form, you will see that there's a section that is asking you to indicate who is the PRP. If you go again to the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, it defines who is the PRP. A PRP is usually the supervisor of the study if you are doing a study for qualification purposes, and the PI, the primary investigator, is the person who's going to conduct the study. So you will be able to complete that. And then we also ask you to be able to indicate to us what is the scope of the study. So when we are looking at what is the scope of the study, we looking at, is it a local study, is it national or international study? If you're going to conduct an international study, you must be able to provide evidence of international approval. You will have worked with certain authorities. Some of the applications that we receive is a student who's enrolled for qualification at NMU, but they are planning to use their population in Zimbabwe for argument's sake. So we want you to provide evidence that you did seek approval from the authorities in the international community for you to be able to conduct the research itself. I spoke to you and said to you that a POPI Act is important. Yes, it's very important. It has implications in terms of how are you going to recruit your participants, how are you going to enter the research site, as well as all the documents that you are going to access as in terms of conducting your study. POPIA Act was passed in recently. It's really protection of personal information. It indicates what information is going to be used, why are you going to use that information, how are you going to use the information, who will have access to the information, and how are you going to process that information. So when we decide on a study, we need to be able to make those decisions in terms of whether is it going to be easier for me as a researcher to be able to access information that I get from the participants. We then go to the scope of the study. Under the scope of the study, you need to be able to indicate to us, as we've said, what is the scope of this study itself. And the study can also be at a master's level, it can be at a PhD level. Also, the study can be international, as we said, as well as national study. You have to be able to be specific in terms of providing a detailed description of these various aspects. I need to speak to you about the part that's asking about funding. I was once asked by a PRP, why are you specific in terms of asking about funding? When we are conducting studies and it's funded by external people, sometimes there could be a vested interest, and you need to be able to indicate to us what is the interest, what is the level of the interest that the funder has in this study. The implication of that is that there could be conflict of interest. Let me give an example. A study might be commissioned by MRC for you to conduct that study. MRC then also becomes your funder because they've commissioned the study. MRC has certain agendas why they are commissioning that study. And sometimes their interest might not be for the good of the target population, the people that you are working with. So you have to be able to state what is the interest, what would be the conflict of interest. I also had a scenario, a situation where a colleague from one of the departments in the faculty, the PRP was a research associate, and they invested their time and resources in terms of guiding students through a particular research. And then they did not really look at whether, and that research was commissioned research by one of the companies. And they did not read properly in terms of understanding the memorandum of understanding, or the MOU. They did not really unpack that in order to see what are some of the stipulations that are indicated in that. When they wanted to publish the study, that's the only time that they were informed that they were not allowed to publish the study. There were certain restrictions that were indicated which were not taken into account. Imagine you've invested your time and your effort, the skills and everything for a study that you cannot even publish because of the stipulations that are indicated there. So we also ask you to keep in mind what are the restrictions that are stipulated. And as I indicated, those restrictions would be in the agreement that you will have signed or your supervisor will have signed. Section F is asking you to look at whether the application, I'm skipping a bit of things because I'm aware of time. We also ask you to indicate to us, when are you going to conduct this study? And when we ask you, when are you going to conduct this study, we want you to be able to give us an indication of when are you going to commence. And the commencement date, we usually say to you that you cannot, Reg H does not do retrospective approvals. So we want your commencement date must take into account the processes, the approval processes that Reg H is going to undertake. So when you submit your proposal to your supervisor as well as to the committee, that date of commencement must factor in about 6 weeks of the approval processes, because we are not, if for instance you want to submit in July your proposal to your supervisors, think about when are you going to work on the corrections, when are you going to then submit to Reg H, and then allowing Reg H to undertake their own processes in terms of approving your research study. So that if you want to collect your data in September already, then it means you work backward and think about 6 weeks from the time when you've conceptualized or you submitted your proposal to your supervisor as well as to the committee for approval. The anticipated date of data collection, the duration. Some of the researchers usually are confused. They think that we're referring to the duration of the study. No, we're not referring to duration of the study. Keep in mind, you're asking for ethics approval for data collection. I want to emphasize that. So your data collection, is it going to take a month? Is it going to take 2 months? Is it going to take 3 months? That is very important, because as a researcher, you want to give yourself also time. Some of the studies by nature would require you to spend more time in the field and in collecting data, as to allow yourself to be able to do all the processes and procedures that are important for you to do. So that date of the anticipated duration of the study is what is the duration of your data collection process? That's what you're going to indicate. You also need to indicate whether this application is related to an existing or current umbrella proposals. And if it's linked to umbrella proposal, you will then need to be able to give us the whether if the umbrella proposal has been submitted for approval, you need to be able to give us that number, because we want to be able to look at the decisions that when we approved the umbrella proposal, did it have a link to your particular study itself? And then G is asking you to look at the objectives of the study. And then here, under this particular area, we want you to stipulate objectives for only data collection procedure. So here you're going to be able to provide us details in terms of what are the objectives of the study linked to data collection. Sometimes we get objectives that are linked to literature review, that are linked to theories. No, we just want for data collection procedure. Then we get to methodology. Under methodology, please provide full details about your recruitment. This section is very, very important. Under recruitment, keep in mind POPI Act. How are you going to recruit? What are the techniques that you are going to use in recruiting participants, as well as methods that you are going to use in recruiting participants? What is the level of risk that you need to consider when you are recruiting? How do you keep in consideration or keep in mind issues of privacy, issues of self-determination, issues of anonymity of the people that you want to use? How are you going to ensure that people are not forced, they are not coerced in terms of participating? Who's going to assist you in identifying your participants? How are they going to identify participants in such a manner that there is no pressure, undue pressure that is given to participants for them to say yes to your study? So that recruitment process must be detailed. Again, as Reg H reviewer, I've seen protocols where there's details in the proposal, but there are no details in this form. People get frustrated because they want to find out, why must I still provide details if my proposal was detailed enough? We're saying it's important because when we are audited, we audited based on the form. We want your proposal is one of the appendices of this form. If you thought about this form at the conceptualization, these are the aspects that you need to keep in mind in terms of how you're going to conduct your research. So you need to be able to provide us with that. You need to be able to state the minimum and maximum number of the participants. That is very important, because when you are looking at the maximum and the minimum and the maximum, what determines those numbers? The type of design that you are going to use will help you. The research approach first. Qualitative research uses small sample sizes. So you are able to identify a smaller sample size. But again, you don't just decide that I'm going to interview 6 people, because there must be reliability in terms of your data. You need to be able to tell us, when you say my minimum numbers are this and my maximum numbers, you need to be able to provide a resource or a theoretical or explanation of how come you got to that. Some of the designs, as I said, are by nature allowing you to use smaller sample size, and others are not allowing you to use smaller sample size. Also, you don't want to recruit more people, to enroll more people in your study than what you require, because you will have wasted people's times. So under recruitment, you state the methods, techniques that you are going to use to identify your individuals. And that is very important for us. You also need to be able to indicate to us if you're going to... Philip, you have a question?
Prof. Soji, we'd just like to inform you that you've got 3 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Prof.
So recruitment, you will have given us information about how are you going to recruit, and under that methodology, there's a sampling strategy, and in your sampling strategy, you need to indicate to us how are you going to sample your population, and what are you going to have inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then you stipulate or you state your inclusion and exclusion criteria. That's very, very important for us to see in your proposal. And then each and every decision that you are making here, you need to motivate. So if you're going to use non-probability sampling, and under non-probability you're using criterion-based, you need to be able to state what would be the criteria that you are going to utilize. In making decisions about exclusion criteria, again, think about issues of fairness, think about issues of equity or equality in research. You don't want to exclude people unfairly when you're making decisions about your exclusion criteria. We say then that also, before we get to the end of this, I just want to go back to... There are two aspects that I want to emphasize. The one is recruitment and the other one is enrollment. Researchers tend to confuse those two aspects. So when we're looking at recruitment, we're saying that there must be a reasonable period of time that should elapse between recruiting of your volunteers as well as enrolling them, because you want to give participants enough time for them to make decisions whether they want to participate in the study. They need to make informed decisions. That's why they complete that informed consent. They need to be able to think about the study. Enrollment, that's where you're going to indicate or explain to us what are the methods and techniques that you are going to use to identify the participants. When you are recruiting, you reach out to participants, you're indicating to them about the study. Enrollment, then, some of the studies, your enrollment happens immediately. Once, for instance, you might have had an information session, you've given them information about the study, and then you also leave them with consent forms. Those who indicate willingness to participate, once they complete the consent form, it's only then that you are enrolling them to participate in the study. When, as part of recruitment, you need to include your recruitment material that you are going to use. You need to attend to issues of respect for persons, self-determination, privacy, as I've already indicated. You also need to provide or demonstrate evidence of fair identification in screening and selection processes, and even in the information that you are going to submit to us. We review that the written as well as oral information that you need to attach in order for us to look at whether you really took care of the ethics considerations in those processes. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Prof. Soji, much appreciated. Over to the delegates. Are there any questions for Prof. Soji? There's a hand up. Dr. Mufumadi, over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My question is on animal studies. I hear a lot of your presentation is focusing more on human study. What are the animal study approach? Do you have any document specific for animal study, or more information where we can look at how the Faculty of Health Science conduct research in animal study?
Yes, there is, if you're looking at the documents that we're referring to, they do have sections where they speak to animal ethics. In the university, we have two ethics committees. We have the Human Research Ethics Committee, as well as the Animal Research Committee. I'm under the impression that there will be somebody who's going to speak to that. I was just asked to speak because the form that we refer to now is only addressing the human aspects of the research, but I do know in all the documents, in the guidelines as well as in the SOP, not in the SOPs, in the policy of the institution, they do have indications of how to conduct research with animals. Some of the aspects that are inherent in the human ethics would be applicable in terms of the animals. For instance, you need to be able to indicate how are you going to protect the animals, how are you going to monitor all the processes that are undertaken with research when you're conducting research with animals.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Prof. Soji. And then Borain, I don't know if I'm getting the name correctly there. Over
Yes,
to
good
you.
morning. It's Richard Moraine. Where would find more information on inclusion and exclusion criteria? It's a very, very informative discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes. So if you look at the guidelines, the ethics guidelines, the Department of Health 2015 guidelines, there's a particular section there, I think it's page 18 or 19, where it indicates to you about inclusion and exclusion criteria.